The biggest issue I see with newer wholesalers and new real estate investors is that they don't know what a good deal looks like. A lot of wholesalers send me their deals, and most of them are not deals at all. Truth is, most new investors don't know how to come up with a good offer. But in today's video, I'm gonna teach you how to properly analyze a deal so that you're fully confident whenever you make your offers. If you're new to the channel, my name's Justin Yahrong. I'm a real estate investor and entrepreneur here in Las Vegas. I've made hundreds of videos teaching people about real estate, money, and self-development. And the goal of this channel is to help you grow your money and your mindset. Also, if you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Justin Yahrong. Let me show you how to crunch the numbers. So what we are looking at right now is the exact calculator that I use to calculate my max offer. I'm gonna teach you exactly how it works, and I'm also going to run through a sample deal just so you know how the calculations work. A lot of investors out there will use just rule of thumbs in order to buy their deals, but I personally like to calculate every single deal individually so I know exactly where I need to be at for an offer in order to profit on a flip. Before I run through an example, let me just explain how the calculator works in general. So the calculator is broken up into a few parts. One is just the property information, the address, and also the ARV, minimum profit, purchase commission credit. So how this calculator works is broken up into a few parts. It pretty much works backwards from where you want to be. Here's how it works. In order for me to get my max allowable offer on a single property, I start with the ARV, what the home is worth after fixing up. I subtract out my minimum profit that I need to make on the property, and then I subtract out any other costs that are associated with the property or financing or anything like that. And when you do that, you come up with the max offer that you can pay for the home. So looking at the calculator, you see there's a section for ARV, there's a section for property cost, there's a section for money cost, and then once you have all of that, you can discover what your max offer is. So I'm gonna clear this out. So let's just run through some sample numbers. I'm gonna be teaching you as I go for what these terms mean and kind of the thought process behind all of them. So first thing we have is the address up top. You can always change this address if you'd like. Right now, I'm just gonna have it say 123 Main Street. Before we use a calculator for a sample deal, let me just give you some basic information. These light blue boxes, that's where you can enter your information in. These grays, they will auto-populate as well as this green. So read this right here at the very bottom. Everything in blue must be entered. Everything in gray and green will autofill. So don't change these gray or green boxes, just change the light blues. Next thing we got is the ARV. And if you don't know what the ARV is, it is the after repair value. And all that means is what is the home worth after it were to be fixed up. So for example, let's just say this home has an ARV, after repair value, of $300,000. That means if you buy this home and you fix it up, it's gonna be worth $300,000 after fixing up. Keep in mind, this is just an imaginary home. These numbers are very realistic, at least for my market. The next thing that we look at is the minimum profit. Now, how we calculate this, or how I do it, it's very simple. I take 10%, so 0.10, times the ARV, enter. And so my goal on every single property is to make at least 10% of the ARV for every property, with the exception of lower end property. So for example, if this is a lower end property and the ARV is worth $150,000, I don't want my minimum profit to be $15,000. My base minimum profit is $20,000. So if I have an ARV of less than $200,000, my minimum profit will be $20,000. I don't care if the home is only worth $50,000, I wanna make 20 grand on it. And the reason why that's my standard is because 20,000 gives you a big enough buffer so if things go wrong, you're most likely not gonna get screwed and you're not gonna lose money. 20 grand is a pretty big buffer for most properties, most. So let me just move this back to $300,000 ARV and we can move on. The next thing that we look at is the purchase commission credit. Now this box is here if you are a realtor. If you are a realtor and you're representing yourself on the purchase, or if you're just referring it out to another agent and you're gonna be getting a referral commission, this is where you can enter what profit you would make as a realtor. Now, I'm not gonna add anything, I'm just gonna write a 0 because I'm not gonna be representing myself for the purchase. But if you were to ever represent yourself for the purchase, that's where you can enter any profit that you would gain as a realtor. The next sections that we're gonna look at are cost. Now, cost can be split up in two ways. One are property cost. all the things associated with rehabbing the property, selling the property, things like that for flips. There's also another cost that we have to look at, which is called money cost. Money costs are basically any cost that you have to pay for getting any financing on the home, like paying any private money lenders, hard money lenders, conventional lenders, any type of lenders that you have to pay, any interest or any service fees. This is where you enter that information. But first, let's start at the rehab cost. So now just for an example, let's just say that this property is 1,000 square feet. Everyone is going to estimate their rehab cost a little bit differently. Now how I do it is I use the square feet and I estimate based off that, depending on property condition. So for the rehab cost, let's say this is again 1,000 square feet home, and I'm gonna multiply that by $30 a square foot. Now that's just something that I typically will use in my market for a particular type of property. I'm not gonna go super in depth about estimating rehab cost. I can make a separate video on that. But just for an example, let's say the rehab cost $30,000 to fix up. Now we have a repair estimate that we can look at. The next thing that we're gonna look at are realtor commissions. And I have this automatically kind of set to 5% because when I have a realtor list the home for any flips that we have, I just do a 5% listing. So 2.5% commission goes to the buyer's agent, 2.5% commission goes to my listing agent. So I just have it set to this. If you ever have any difference, you can write 6% or 4% or whatever percent that you have. And as you can see, this realtor box, this commission box, it'll change. The next thing that we look at are the closing costs. Now, right now, I have it set for 2%, and that is 2% of this ARV, which gives me a $6,000 budget for closing costs. And I forgot to explain earlier, but the realtor commissions are the same way. This is 5% of this ARV. So that's just a simple budget for closing costs. The point is, you just gotta budget for something. I don't care if you budget 3%, 4%, whatever. Figure out on average, what are other investors in your area paying for closing costs, and then you can base it off of that. The next thing we want to budget for are just something for taxes, utilities, and insurance. We want to budget for those things. It doesn't have to be perfect. The whole point of this exercise and analyzing the deal using these numbers is to budget for something. And all this does is it takes 1% of the ARV, so we're budgeting $3,000 for any utilities or taxes or any insurance that you will have to pay if you're going to be flipping a home. The next thing that we look at for property cost are monthly HOA costs. Now, if you don't know what an HOA is, it's basically called a homeowners association. And this is for communities like condo communities or even some single family communities where they have associations and you have to pay an HOA fee every single month for them taking care of the exterior or the community or whatever it is. I personally have not bought in a homeowners association. Right now, I'm just gonna budget $0 for this, but if you did have a monthly fee that you needed to pay, that's where you enter this right here. So after entering all the property information, you can see right here, total property cost, we're at $54,000. Now I'd like to move on to the money cost. Now, like I said before, this is just any cost associated with financing the property and the purchase. First thing we're gonna look at is the loan amount. Now, for the loan amount, it's gonna be determined by a couple things. One is the purchase price right here. Two is what kind of down payment you need to put. So I haven't entered a purchase price just yet. Let me just add something. Let me call it $100,000 right now, just to put something there for the purchase price. But once I have a purchase price in, let me adjust this loan amount to what I typically look at for deals. So for all my deals right now, I've been using a lot of hard money and a lot of private money. So for this example, I'm just gonna take the example of using hard money. And most of the time, my hard money lender, they will lend me 90% of the purchase price. So how I calculate this is I write an equal sign. I take the purchase price, I click the purchase price there, I do the multiplication symbol, and then I multiply it by 90% because I know my lender, they allow me to put 10% down and they'll give me 90%. So that's how I'll calculate the loan amount. Press enter. That's the loan amount. And again, this is not an exact purchase price. We can change this, but I just wanted to put something. But the next thing we look at for the money cost is the hold time. How long are you going to hold on the property? So typically the hold time for flips, at least in my experience, I've held onto my homes anywhere between 4 months and 8 months. I would say a typical hold time that you can expect is anywhere between 6 and 12 months. All of mine have mostly been in 4 to 6 months, sometimes 8 if I have to evict a tenant. But just to have a general number in there, I think most of my flips will take 6 months or less. So I'm just gonna budget for 6 months. That number might be different for you in your market, I don't know. So just figure out what you wanna budget for. The point is, you gotta budget for something. You have to budget for some type of hold time. And if you don't know what a hold time is essentially how long you hold onto the property from start to the finish. So right when you buy it to right when you resell it. That's the hold time in months. The next thing that we look at is the interest rate. So we want to enter an interest rate that our lender will be charging us. And keep in mind, if you're gonna be a cash buyer, you won't have these things because you're buying it in cash. But assuming you're gonna be using a lender for this, you'll have these items. So for the interest rate, let's say my lender gives me 8% interest. So I could just write 8 right there. It auto-populates the percentage. The next thing we look at are the points that they charge. If you're unfamiliar with points, all points are a percentage of the loan amount from your lender that your lender will charge you up front. So for example, if your lender is going to lend you $100,000 and they charge 1 point, that means they will charge you 1% of that $100,000, which is $1,000 upfront right when you buy the property. That's an upfront cost that they charge. Every lender is different. I would definitely make sure to ask your lender to see what they charge before you use them. And just for simplicity's sake, let's say this lender charges me 2% points. So they're gonna charge me 2% of the loan amount, which auto calculates in this case to $1,800. The next thing that we're gonna look at is the service fee. Now, some hard money lenders will charge a service fee, some won't. The concept is very similar to points. They're basically an upfront cost, but it's not determined by the loan amount. It's just an upfront cost that you have to pay. Some lenders have it, some don't. So again, be sure to ask your hard money lenders first before you work with them. And let's just say this lender charges me a service fee of $1,500, which is common. So that's where you enter it here, and it just auto-populates right here in the gray section. So everything we've entered so far, that is all the money cost information for your primary lender, your hard money lender most likely. Now, I have 2 extra sections that you can use if you plan to use a gap lender. If you don't know what a gap lender is, let me explain it very briefly. So for example, let's say you have a hard money lender that's going to be lending you 90% of the purchase price for your home. That means the down payment is 10%. Now, you can either come up with that 10% down payment with your own money, or you could choose to raise that 10% down payment from another person, like an individual. And this individual would be a private money lender. It's just an individual with money who wants to make a return on their money. And you can get them to fund the 10% down payment so that you can essentially walk out of there, no money out of your pocket. So you would find an individual to fund the gap, the difference, which is the 10% down payment in this case. And if you decided to go that route, I have 2 extra sections for you. So you also have the gap loan amount and the gap interest rate. So you can always adjust these numbers depending on what you're asking for a gap lender. But what I typically do is this. I take the difference between the purchase price and the loan amount, which gets me the down payment. And I also add all the closing cost, and I add all the rehab costs. That's all the stuff that I'm looking for funding from a gap lender typically. So if I press enter, so notice that I would be seeking $46,000 from a gap lender, from an individual to help me cover the down payment, all the closing costs, and all the rehab costs. Now that's just usually my style. You can definitely mix it up. You can choose to ignore the closing costs or ignore the rehab costs, and you can just say, hey, I need money for the down payment only. You could do that. This is completely flexible. You just have to adjust the formula. This is the formula that's already in this sheet. I'm just gonna leave this here, but you can always adjust it. Like if you wanted to remove the closing cost, this little blue one right here, 6,000, you could always take this and you could delete, and now you would only want to raise $40,000 because you said, I can cover the $6,000 closing costs myself. But I'm going to undo that because this is what I typically do. I try to raise money for the down payment, closing cost, and the rehab cost. And I typically round up just a little bit, just in case I need extra. So the other thing that we look at is the gap interest rate. So most people will not lend you money for free. A private money lender who's gonna be lending you money for the gap, they're usually gonna want some type of return on their money, most likely. unless they're like a really close family member and they just want to see you succeed, which is pretty awesome. Now, the interest rate that you're going to provide for that gap lender, it's completely negotiable between you and that gap lender. Just for purposes of entering a number, let me just call this 8%. Let's say I pay my gap lender 8% return. So that's where we enter it here. And this is an annualized return. This is not a flat fee return. And if you enter this gap interest rate right here, this is an annualized rate, just like this interest rate right here. And what that essentially means is the longer you hold on to the property, the more interest you're gonna have to pay. There's also something called a flat interest rate that some investors pay their private money lenders. I typically don't do that. And what a flat interest rate means is that you're gonna be paying the same amount of interest to that lender regardless of how long you hold on to the property. For me, I don't like to do that. I like to do an annualized rate so that however long I hold on to the property, that's how much I'm gonna pay them. It just makes more sense to me. So now that we have all this information, you can see that everything else auto-populated. So we have the total gap interest that we would pay the private money lender at the end of the deal. So if this actually took 6 months, this is what you pay that gap lender at the end of it. And we also have the total interest, which is pretty much all the interest that you're gonna be paying to both your gap lender and your main lender. Then we have the total money cost, which also includes any points or service fees that you'd have to pay. So as you can see here, for these particular numbers, the total money cost is $8,000, $8,700. Now, how we actually use this sheet to calculate our max offer, now this is where we get into it. So as you can see here in this bright green, it shows a max offer of $207,000. Now, this isn't our max offer yet. We still have to do one more slight adjustment, and let me explain why. Right now, this is showing our max offer, and all these numbers as far as money cost and everything else is based off a purchase price of $100,000. And what that means is that this loan amount is based off that $100,000. This gap loan amount is based off that $100,000. And that's not an accurate number. I just put $100,000 to have a number. Now, what we wanna do here is we wanna get this purchase price number and this max offer number as close to each other as humanly possible. So what I will do from here, again, you're not gonna wanna change this green number, that auto-populates. What you do wanna change is this purchase price so that all these interest rate numbers are reflective of what's accurate. So I'm gonna change this 100,000 to 207,000 because I wanna match this number, and watch what happens to this green number in max offer. Notice how it shifted from 207,000 to 201,000. I wanna get it closer, so now I'm gonna say 201,000. And boom. So now they're in the same 100,000s, they're both 201,000. Doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, but now that you know that this is an accurate max offer, and you know that because look, the loan amount, it's based off of this purchase price. And this based off of this purchase price. So this is now an accurate number, but let me show you how that was calculated. So how you calculate this max offer, it takes the ARV, this $300,000, it adds any purchase commission credit that you would have gained if you were a realtor representing yourself in a purchase. It also subtracts the minimum profit that you wanna make on this property, which again, was calculated up here. And it subtracts the total cost that you have for this property, and you arrive to that number by adding the property costs with the money costs. So as you can see, we worked backwards. So if I click this max offer of how it's calculated, you see it starts with the ARV right here, this 300,000. It adds the possible commission credit that you would have gained. It subtracts your minimum profit that you want, and it subtracts all the potential costs that you anticipate. So when you do that calculation, you get your max offer. And you just have to make sure that this is the same as this, or at least as close as possible. And you see right here, if you buy this home at around $201,000, you will profit 30 grand, roughly. So that is exactly how I calculate my max offer and how you can do it too. If you want to use this exact same calculator that I use to calculate your own max offers, go to the description below. I linked it there so that you can use it yourself. Just make sure to download it or save a copy of it into your own drive because you can't edit the version if you just click the link. Also, if you want to grow your real estate business, whether you're brand new or if you already got deals under your belt, DM me the word coach on Instagram at JustinYou'reWrong. I'll see you at the next one.